Hello YouTube, this is DVD Review Studios here, and today I'm going to be doing a Blu-ray movie review on Star Wars Episode 8 The Last Jedi. This is a movie that I've basically been silent on. I've not revealed any kind of opinion that I've had on this movie, and despite the fact that a few people did ask for a movie review from me back in December, and initially I was actually working on something and I did say yes, it is coming, etc., because I did review Rogue One and The Force Awakens when they were in cinemas, and with this film I kind of gave up. To be honest, I just felt incredibly numb after watching this movie. I had certain hopes and certain expectations for the second film in this new sequel trilogy, and basically nothing was fulfilled, and a lot of things that I was hoping to learn more about and to see more of were just turned upside down. And of course, when I say that, I'm referring to Supreme Leader Snoke and Luke Skywalker, who were basically wasted in this film. And I still stand by that opinion, although I can personally say that the demise of Luke is very poetic, and the sequence involving Supreme Leader Snoke deters away from him becoming a new emperor and dying in the next film, and basically that sequence in its entirety being mesmerizing and shocking, especially for new viewers of this film. I really do wish that they had gone for a different approach with those two characters in particular. But upon rewatching this film, I enjoyed it a lot more the second time round, and overall this film is certainly what I would term as a Marmite film. You either love it or you hate it, and now I can really appreciate it. I certainly think this is a film definitely worth watching on multiple occasions, and overall, despite how I felt the first time I watched it, my views and overall opinions definitely have shifted, and even though I will mention here and there my initial thoughts, I'm going to try and be more positive and focus on my thoughts now on this movie. In terms of the actual Blu-ray, we have a variation in slipcovers once again, similarly to what we had with the Force Awakens Blu-ray release. So this time around we have the Resistance slipcover, which is what I opted for, and a First Order variation as well, which to be honest doesn't look as good in my opinion, certainly missing some of the pivotal characters from the movie, but this one does look great. It's great to see Carrie Fisher and Mark Hamill on here, and the dynamic pose of Rey looks fantastic, and the red colouring taken from Crate, etc. Overall, very cool stuff. I also really quite like how the spines line up nicely with the previous film, which I hope Episode 9 does continue with that consistency when that's released, etc. On the back, we have an image of Kylo Ren facing off with the Force projection of Luke Skywalker. Some various headshots of the characters featured in the movie. It's a 2-disc set, with disc 1 featuring the main movie and an audio commentary, and disc 2 with all the special features. And overall, the special features that we got this time round compared to, say, Rogue One, we got some incredible stuff. First and foremost, we got an incredible documentary film titled The Director and the Jedi, which was about an hour and a half long, and it was overall very insightful. It certainly made me appreciate some of the subtleties, and overall gave some great explanations behind things that I certainly liked and other things that I definitely disliked. And it was just overall great to see some thought processes from Rian Johnson himself, and his input, and just seeing him impressed and trying to actually work out what the motives really were behind this film and how he actually constructed it together. And one thing for sure, Canto Bight, which a lot of people really hate that sequence, the casino world, it looks 1,000 times better in the behind the scenes than it does in the actual movie, which is amazing. But anyway, I definitely recommend checking that out. It is quite long for a documentary film about a film like this, but if you have the time, it's definitely worth giving a watch. Next up is Balance of the Force, and then we have a few scene breakdowns. We have Lighting the Spark, Creating a Space Battle, Snoke and Mirrors, which was very good, and Showdown on Crate. And I also loved how on Crate, where we see the trenches with the soldiers gearing up, it was great to see the director of Rogue One in there as a little cameo. I thought that was actually quite funny to see Gareth Edwards just popping his little head up in there in the background. Anyway, that's the scene breakdowns, and then we have finally Andy Serkis Live, One Night Only, which basically just shows the entire sequence where Snoke is interrogating Rey, only without the CGI'd Supreme Leader Snoke overlaying the motion capture suit, so you see Andy Serkis in the flesh, delivering such an incredible performance, which I really thoroughly enjoyed. And in terms of deleted scenes, we have some really great stuff that, to be honest, I really wish had been in the final cut of the movie, but it's certainly certainly insightful to see these things, and it's great to see them despite the fact that some of them are incomplete in terms of CGI, for example. But the effort has definitely gone into this Blu-ray release, and I'm very happy with it. The movie's on for 152 minutes, and it's rated 12 here in the UK for moderate violence. Removing the slipcover, we have the movie poster beneath, which I really do like. On the back, we have the same old girth as on the slipcover. And for the discs, we have a really cool shot of Kylo Ren for disc 1, and on disc 2 for the bonus features we have Rian Johnson directing 3PO. Giving some context to my thoughts on this film, to be honest, it feels like a creative vision from Rian Johnson clashing with yet another creative vision from J.J. Abrams, who directed The Force Awakens, a movie that I particularly liked, and I certainly was intrigued by several plot points, particularly who is Supreme Leader Snoke, and is he Darth Plagueis as referenced in Revenge of the Sith from Palpatine himself, and will Snoke have an overall presence on the entirety of Star Wars? For instance, did he influence Palpatine to then influence Vader, etc., which is certainly something that I would have welcomed with open arms. It would have been absolutely fantastic to connect both trilogies to the sequel trilogy. And then we have Rey as a character. Who is she and who are her parents? We have random characters such as Maz Kanata, and what is her significance, considering that she said to Rey that where did she get that lightsaber from would be a question for another time. I would love answers to that question. And then we have plot points such as where is Luke Skywalker and why is he on the island of Arctu, and how will he react to know that Han Solo has sadly died. There are loads of amazing little seeds planted in The Force Awakens that the majority of is neglected in The Last Jedi. And with those thoughts in mind, I'm going to detail my overall pros and cons for The Last Jedi, which I think is a very secure way of talking about what went right and what went wrong. So in terms of pros, I think the strength in terms of comedy is great, especially with the Porgs, a very creative outlet, which were not only useful to disguise puffins on set of the actual little island that was actually filmed in Ireland. I just thought it was incredibly useful to create this animal, not only to sell merchandise because Disney do love their money, but also because it would be much easier to mask these puffins with porgs, which is a really great idea. I loved the dynamic between Luke and Rey after Luke dropped the cynicism, and of course we have the dynamic of Poe, Finn, and BB-8. And overall, I just think the characters definitely do have a strength in terms of being comical, while also delivering a very serious narrative. What I personally loved overall about this movie was an updated perception of the Force. Mainly Yoda as his spirit summoning lightning, as some kind of omnipotent Force ghost figure. And I really do love how Luke allows Rey to understand the Force when he's basically giving her the first lesson and sees the major strength to her. And I do love that sequence overall. It's incredibly creative, and that certainly was more interesting than what Ben Kenobi issued to Luke initially in A New Hope. It was definitely an updated version of that. And speaking of Luke Skywalker, I love the cynicism and the broken old man Luke style character, basically how he's assuming both the roles of Ben Kenobi and also Yoda, since he's obviously now the mentor and the hermit at the same time. And I love the routine sequence where he is living alone, and he basically does have the potential to be saved from the cruel life that he does bring upon himself. But as he says, he has gone to this island to die, and I love that as a concept. I just really wish that he had been redeemed overall rather than sacrificing himself, but certainly the character definitely was portrayed, in my opinion, very well. I just really wish he hadn't died at the end of it. A controversial scene from this movie amongst fans was certainly the Canto Bight scene, the casino world, which was basically to drive the B-plot of the movie, where Finn, Rose, and BB-8 would go to this planet to try and find a Codebreaker character, who would then sneak aboard Snoke's ship with them and disable the lightspeed tracking so then the Resistance could speed away undetected, which was the main issue throughout the movie. And overall as a concept it does sound very good, but overall I think this sequence in its entirety was a small nod towards the liberation of defenseless animals and a ploy to incorporate the wrong in animal cruelty, which is obviously a message that I'm completely behind, as should any decent human being be behind as well. But I personally didn't feel it fit in a Star Wars movie. The animals, the Favias as they're called, the like little space horses, which I thought was quite comical with huge ears, were an interesting concept of an animal, but they spent way too much time on the scene. and it certainly dragged in my personal opinion. I don't hate the sequence, but it's certainly something that looked, as I said, more impressive in the behind the scenes, and in the film it really didn't serve its purpose in my personal opinion. Narrowing down a particular character that certainly impressed me was General Hux, surprisingly. Overall, a great performance and certainly an over-the-top one, which I think is a great quality to the character, and that translated over from The Force Awakens to The Last Jedi very nicely. And I love the one-liners from the character, in particular on the Battle of Krayt, and I love the dynamic between him and Kylo Ren. And there's certainly a development to his character, and I cannot wait to see what they do with him, and particularly him versus Kylo Ren in Episode 9. That seems like something that could possibly happen. And I love the sequence in particular where Ren is lying on the floor, as is Snoke decapitated in half, and General Hux just finds this as is and realizes that Kylo Ren is still alive. And so he actually goes to reach for his blaster, I assume to finish off Kylo Ren, only to hesitate as he sees Kylo coming around, and I love that sequence. It's very subtle, but certainly was memorable for me personally. Speaking of the Battle of Krayt, I love the colours throughout that sequence. The deep red is absolutely fantastic, and personally I think the final fight between the Force projection of Luke Skywalker and Kylo Ren is one of the most unique lightsaber fights we've had in a very long time. And I love the subtle details once again of Kylo Ren being able to leave footprints on the planet. Obviously he is there, and before it's revealed that Luke actually isn't there, he throughout the scene is not leaving any footprints at all. Which is certainly a unique thing that I noticed on the second watch of this movie. And personally, I really do wish that had actually been Luke, that he'd finally come round, that he'd finally become, again, the Jedi Master that we all know him as. And it would have been a really sweet ending, in my opinion, to see him leading the Resistance with his lightsaber once again. That would have been an absolutely fantastic end, but sadly, the character did pass, and that's something that really does not sit well with me, but it is canon now, and we'll just have to see if Mark Hamill reprises the role in Episode 9 to become a Force Ghost. And finally, to conclude this video, we have what I personally didn't like about The Last Jedi. First of all, Supreme Leader Snoke's portrayal of overconfidence and arrogance resulting in his premature death, with nothing else added to his character, was certainly something that I have a huge problem with still, particularly because he's very calm and very reserved in The Force Awakens, but there's nothing added to his character to make him become so overly confident. Plus, his final line in The Force Awakens that Kylo Ren and Hux should go to him and that it's time to complete Ren's training. We don't see any training commence, we don't hear anything more of the Knights of Ren unless the Praetorian Guards are the Knights of Ren, and so I think this is certainly something that clashes heavily between The Last Jedi and The Force Awakens. Towards the latter end of the movie, there is a really cringeworthy kiss sequence between Finn and Rose, spawning from Finn about to sacrifice his life only for Rose to suddenly save him. That entire sequence in itself was an absolute waste of suspense and potential, and if Finn had died, I honestly would have been okay with that because it would have served a purpose. But Rose swooping in at the end just killed everything about that scene, and I absolutely hate it. Speaking of Rose as a character, killing Rose's sister, Paige, right at the beginning of the film where nobody even knows who she is or what significance she could possibly have, it's just a waste for the character, and obviously she could have had a lot more screen time. Perhaps we could have seen both characters interacting and then learned that they really had a close bond, and then take Paige away if you really had to. But honestly, what a wasted scenario, and certainly a very lackluster death in my personal opinion. And speaking of death, we have the demise of all the Resistance leaders, including Admiral Akbar, a fan favourite, and his demise certainly does not sit well with me at all. I absolutely love that character despite the minimal amount of screen time that he had, and seeing him in The Force Awakens was great, and now obviously the character is now gone. I believe the actor who portrayed him has sadly passed away, but this was not the end that Admiral Akbar deserved. That was absolutely atrocious. And then spawning from that, we have Leia's Force scene in space, which was pretty ridiculous the first time I watched it, but honestly, compared to say the prequels and other sequences of a similar sort. It's not anything we haven't seen before, really, and overall it wasn't too bad. It just felt really unfitting in my opinion, and I actually thought that was going to be the demise of Leia, because sadly Carrie Fisher passed away, and so we don't really know what is going to happen with that character, because Leia is still alive at the end of The Last Jedi. And so we don't really know how episode 9 is going to actually kill the character off, which is something that, again, does not sit well with me at all. But either way, it's not going to be satisfactory, because it's either going to be CGI, which Disney have already denied is going to happen. It's either going to be somebody else portraying the character of Leia, which obviously is a no-go, and Leia could potentially be killed off in the opening crawl of episode 9. Either way, it's going to be unsatisfactory and disappointing in general, so we can't really speculate or reason with this. It's just going to happen. Carrie Fisher as Princess Leia is not going to happen in episode 9, and either way we're going to be disappointed about how that is handled. So anyway, that's been my overall thoughts on the movie in general. So thanks for watching my review on The Last Jedi Blu-ray and listening to my thoughts on the movie in itself. I hope you enjoyed this video. Be sure to leave a like down below. Let me know in the comments what you thought of The Last Jedi. Do you agree or disagree with any of my opinions? And please subscribe down below for more upcoming videos.